is my Black British woman's voice, and today I want to touch on the subject called the Mandela Affect. The Mandela Affect is a vaguely offensive term used to describe an effect which has now become part of psychological folklore, if you will. Now, the Mandela Effect, basically, back during the days of Nelson Mandela's life while he was still alive, a core grouping of people swore, hand on Bible, hand on whatever religious text they were following at the time, that at one point the news did a news segment on Nelson Mandela dying in jail. Now, there are people that swear blind that they watched this news segment on television, that this news segment said, newsflash, Nelson Mandela is in jail, this is the time it happened, this is how it happened. However, there is no substantive evidence to back up that claim, because there are other people that claim never to have seen anything like that ever. Now, as a result of this, psychologists, theorists, whatever you would call them, have come up with the idea that there is a thing called the Mandela Effect, where you think you saw something, you think you heard something, but in actuality it didn't happen. And the Mandela Effect has now become the byword for something basically which means deceit. In my opinion, its inverse meaning, its subtle meaning, its insidiousness means deceit. It means it didn't happen. It almost, what they've done is they've taken a phenomena and they've parlayed it with the idea that actually you could say this was deceit on many different levels. You didn't see Nelson Mandela on television being talked about because he had been killed in jail or died in jail. Therefore, actually, in 100 years' time, we could even argue that Nelson Mandela wasn't nearly the greatest man that ever walked on the face of the earth, which in my opinion, he was. He was a great man. For one huge reason, he forgave. If I were him and I'd been released, the fact that these white people had killed my kid, and whilst I was in jail, and had subjugated my country to 35 years of torture and apartheid, would be sufficient for me to carry a grudge for the longest time. But he is amazing. He is godlike just for that ability alone, just for forgiving. So the fact that you've now parlayed an expression called the Mandela Effect, you've used his name to crystallize this phenomenon, which ultimately means deceit, means to me that's insidious racism. That's quite dangerous. However, what I find further ridiculous, what I find mind-blowing, is the notion that living in a dictatorial state such as South Africa, a fascist state such as South Africa, that not one of these white people who claim to know this phenomenon or talk about this phenomenon, it hasn't occurred to them, these racists, that in actual fact there is a new segment floating around somewhere in someone's database crying out that Nelson Mandela was killed. It's called propaganda. It's propaganda. It's what the Nazis did to the millions of gypsies, blacks, and Jews that they killed. It was propaganda. They issued dictates declaring that Jews were rats, that blacks were inferior, and they passed it off as if it was factual news. Why not one of these people who talk about this Mandela Effect phenomenon have not come up with the tangible notion that in fact they did issue a new segment crying, saying that Nelson Mandela was dead, but that it's probably been hidden, sequestered somewhere so that it can't come to light is amazing to me. It just defies belief. I believe wholeheartedly that a new segment was issued on South African TV saying Nelson Mandela's dead. To probably gauge the response to see if he becomes martyred. To dissuade people from further revolutions. To gauge effect, B to gauge to dissuade further revolutions, and there's probably a C there, but I can't think of it at the moment. But the idea that hundreds of thousands of people had hallucinated this is fatuous. It's ridiculous. I believe conclusively that they did see it and that it was just a propaganda method. Anyway, that's my opinion on the Nelson Mandela, the Mandela Effect, my thoughts and feelings on it. Please, if you're a black person, don't take any notice. I mean, the name is so fucking offensive. The idea that this is a deceit, this was a hallucination, therefore it's the Mandela Effect. I mean, that has all the hallmarks of white supremacist denigration right there, doesn't it? But anyway, That's my thoughts and feelings on that phenomena. This is One Black British Woman's Voice, and I'm out.